Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Aces High here. Today I am bringing you guys the next step in my Napoleon journey. So we finished up the entire Napoleon Epic History TV series. Now we're into a kind of second Napoleon series that is a 4-video type thing that focuses on Napoleon's marshals. So for those of you that don't know, I did do a little bit of research, and it looks like there was 26 marshals total, 18 at the beginning of the Grande Armée, and 8 more made over time. So I'm really excited to just jump in and learn about them. One of the cool things here is it's another Epic History TV video, and throughout the 4 parts, they're actually going to rank them how they think they were in line of who's the best marshal. So each of these videos are going to be about 30 minutes, so 35, 40 minutes with my reactions and all that. But I'm really excited to check it out because some of these marshals were really, really cool and really interesting, and I want to learn a lot more about them. If you guys haven't subbed, make sure you hit that sub button, ring the bell, because it really helps me out, and, then I feel like I'm loved. Anyway, this is part 1, Napoleon's marshals. Let's learn about some of them.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal or Maréchal goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton. The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age. But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. That year he picked 18 of France's best generals and made them marshals of the empire.
Wow.
8 more were created in the years that followed. The marshals outranked everyone in the new empire, apart from Napoleon's family, princes, and ministers of state. They came from every background, sons of aristocrats and innkeepers, professional soldiers, and those who'd learned on the job, old-school Republicans and Bonaparte loyalists. The youngest, just half the age of the oldest.
Wow, that's quite
and though
the difference.
Marshal was a civil title.
How old was Napoleon at this time? Because I heard from one of the comments somebody left me on a previous video that 4 marshals were younger than Napoleon. So if his youngest, was it Deveau, I think his name is how you say it, was 34 years old, then Napoleon at the time was, what, 36, 38 when he was, how many years older than him was he, I guess?
Not strictly a military rank. The men known to the army as les gros bonnets, the big hats, were arguably the most extraordinary, diverse, brilliant, and flawed group of military commanders in history. The most favoured were showered with titles and wealth. But the price too was high. Half were wounded, 3 were killed or died of wounds. 2 were executed.
Oh, wow.
This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's marshals. All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from retired Lieutenant Colonel Rémy Porte, former chief historian of the French Army. First, a thank you to our sponsor, Call of War. Call of War.
Let's go ahead and skip past this. There we go.
Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. Many were brilliant leaders. A few probably deserved to be marshals, more than some who were. Any selection can only be difficult and highly subjective, but here's our pick of 12 of the best.
Okay.
Bertrand, Napoleon's faithful aide-de-camp, who commanded 4th Corps at the Battle of Leipzig. Clausel, a veteran commander of the war in Spain. Desaix, Napoleon's close friend, killed at Marengo, aged 31. Prince Eugène, Napoleon's adopted son, a hero of the Russian retreat. Gérard, one of Napoleon's best corps commanders by 1814, made a marshal by King Louis-Philippe in 1830.
Interesting. Of course, I know Eugene, or I guess is how you would say it in France. Of course, I know this one.
Goudon, whose infantry division bore the brunt of the fighting at Auerstedt in 1806, died of wounds near Smolensk in 1812.
Okay.
Junot, who first served with Napoleon at Toulon in 1793, probably committed suicide after his fall from favour in 1813. Lassalle, the Hussar general, among the best light cavalry commanders of the Napoleonic Wars, killed at Wagram, aged 34. Maison, who told his division on the morning of Leipzig that they must win that day or all be killed, made marshal by King Charles X in 1829. Nansouty, the heavy cavalry commander who died of wounds and exhaustion, aged 46. Saint-Hilaire, hero of Austerlitz, died of wounds received at Aspern in 1809. Vandamme, of whom Napoleon once said, "If I had to invade hell, I'd want him commanding the vanguard." And now, Napoleon's 26 marshals, ranked in order of merit. 26. Marshal Perignon.
I've never heard of
When
it.
Napoleon created the first 18 marshals, 4 were honorary marshals, recognized for past service to France. Perignon was one of these.
Okay.
A former officer in the Royal Army, he'd won fame in the Revolutionary Wars, fighting the Spanish on the Pyrenees front. He later served as ambassador to Spain. After a brief retirement, he was sent to Italy and commanded the French left wing at the disastrous Battle of Novi, where the army was routed by Suvorov's Russians, and Perignon was badly wounded and captured. His appointment as honorary marshal in 1804 was a political move by Napoleon, a way to win acceptance for his new empire, by emphasizing continuity with the revolution, by rewarding its military heroes. Perignon never held active command as a marshal, but served as governor of Parma, and later Naples. His eldest son, Pierre, was a cavalry officer, killed at Friedland in 1807.
Okay.
Perignon retired in 1813, but refused to support Napoleon when he returned from exile in 1815 and was stripped of his marshal's baton. His rank was later restored by King Louis XVIII. 25.
Very interesting. Yeah, I had never even heard of him.
Marshal Brune.
Yet another one I haven't heard of.
Brune was another marshal whose appointment owed much to politics.
Okay.
As a fiery Republican and former close ally of revolutionary leader Georges Danton, his support was politically useful for Napoleon. Brune
Look at this. He was murdered at age 52. I want to hear more about that.
joined the army during the Terror, the most extreme period of the revolution. His political connections ensured rapid promotion, and he was sent to help put down a counter-revolutionary revolt in Bordeaux. In 1795, as a 30-year-old brigadier general, he helped Napoleon disperse a royalist mob in Paris with the famous whiff of grape shot. Brune then served with Napoleon in Italy, fighting in several of his famous early victories. He won a reputation as a fierce divisional commander and enthusiastic plunderer of Italian towns and churches.
Of course.
In 1798, he commanded the French occupation of Switzerland, while extorting 200,000 francs from the wealthy Swiss communes, the equivalent of several $1 million today.
I know that there's some marshals that took more or less and allowed their troops to take more or less from places, but he seems like he's definitely one that allowed a lot of plunder and actually encouraged it.
It was said that Brune's personal carriage was so laden with gold when it left Switzerland that it immediately broke down. The next year he won his most important victory while commanding French forces in Holland, defeating an Anglo-Russian army at the Battle of Castricum and saving France from invasion. But a short, calamitous spell commanding the army of Italy convinced Napoleon that Brune was not fit for high command. Instead, he sent him to be ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, where in 1804 he learned that he'd been made a marshal. But Brune's lack of delicacy, combined with a towering sense of self-importance, did not make him a successful diplomat. He was recalled to France, but as governor of the Hanseatic ports, blundered again, drafting a treaty with Sweden that failed to make any mention of the French emperor. Whether a deliberate insult or act of incompetence, Napoleon was furious, and Brune was sacked. Brune spent the next 7 years at his country estate. He bitterly opposed the return of the Bourbon monarchy in 1814.
That seems like such a small mistake to get you sacked like that. You just didn't mention Napoleon?
And rallied to Napoleon when he returned from exile the next year. But in the tumult following Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, Brune was cornered by a royalist mob in Avignon, murdered, and tossed into the River Rhône.
Wow.
24.
I wondered, did they ever recover his body? Let me know if you guys know down in the comments.
Marshal Sergey. Sergey was another of the 4 honorary marshals whom Napoleon wished to recognize for past service. In contrast to Brune, Sergey was a professional soldier of the old school, a veteran of the 7 Years' War, and a stern disciplinarian. This background was not necessarily an asset during the French Revolution, when any officer who'd served in the Royal Army was viewed with suspicion. But Colonel Sergey's training and diligence were soon recognized as assets to the new French Republic. By 1795, he was a general serving with Napoleon in Italy, where his stand against corruption and looting won him the nickname the Virgin of Italy.
He was up there. He was 61 years old when he became a marshal. That's it's definitely up there in age for sure. He doesn't look like he's 61. I mean, based off this painting, of course. This one makes him look a little bit older, but,
Sergey was a reliable, if unspectacular, commander, who won an important victory at Mondovi at a crucial moment in Napoleon's rise to fame. The following year, he accepted the Austrian surrender at the end of the long siege of Mantua.
Okay.
2 years later, fighting under General Moreau's command, Sergey and his division were cut off by the Russians and forced to surrender. Released on parole, he was back in Paris in time to support Napoleon's coup d'etat of 18 Brumaire. Sergey then retired from active command, but Napoleon, remembering his past service, made him an honorary marshal and governor of Les Invalides, the retirement home and hospital for old soldiers. There, shortly before the fall of Paris in 1814, Sergey oversaw the burning of more than 1,000 captured flags and standards.
I did, in the last video, I remember seeing that.
To prevent them falling into Allied hands. 23. Marshal Kellerman. Kellerman was another honorary marshal, the oldest at 68, and famed throughout France as the saviour of the Revolution. A career soldier from a middle-class background, he'd seen distinguished service as a cavalry officer in the 7 Years' War. At the beginning of the...
Imagine making marshal at 68 years old. That's incredible. That's, 54 years older... sorry, my math was horrible. 34 years older than the youngest marshal.
Revolutionary Wars, he was a general, commanding a frontier army at the moment of greatest crisis, when it seemed foreign invasion was about to stamp out the revolution and restore the ancien régime. But at Valmy, in September 1792, Kellerman's Army of the Centre stood its ground, and with a ferocious artillery barrage, persuaded the Prussian army to withdraw. Valmy was not a stunning tactical victory, but it was a turning point of history that saved the infant French Republic. When the revolution took a more radical turn, even a war hero like Kellerman became suspected of royalist links and spent a year in prison under the threat of the guillotine. Acquitted and restored to command, he was poised to launch a new offensive in Italy when he was sidelined, first by General.
That's something interesting. It always gets me when I hear our American accent, and I mean, there's plenty of different American accents. Out of all the American accents, there's certain parts of the country that have less of just a harsh accent. We still have that American accent where we don't talk like proper British English. But typically the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, and parts of like the Northeast and a little bit in the center kind of speak with a cleaner accent, I guess would be the way to put it, but still nowhere near what British would be. Anyway, that's I always hear words when the narrator says stuff, and it always surprises me, like the word he said guillotine, and I just growing up it's always been guillotine, you know, so. I don't know, maybe I've just been saying that wrong. I mean, I know I've been saying it not proper English, but wrong on American standards, or is it just that Americans say it that way? I wonder, you know?
Scherer, then in favour of a rising new talent, General Bonaparte. Kellerman later specialised in army administration and training, a role he continued to perform under Napoleon, whilst also entering politics and serving as President of the Senate. His son, General François-Étienne Kellerman, followed in his father's footsteps, serving as one of Napoleon's best cavalry commanders. 22. Marshal Grushi.
Really? 22? I thought you'd be higher.
When Napoleon returned from his first exile in 1815, he created one last marshal for the upcoming campaign, Emmanuel de Grushi. Although now infamous for failing to march to Napoleon's aid during the Battle of Waterloo, up to that moment, Grushi had had a long and distinguished military career. An aristocrat who embraced the French Revolution, Grushi served with distinction throughout the Revolutionary Wars, fighting counter-revolutionaries in the Vendée and serving in Italy, where he was wounded and captured at the Battle of Novi. Under the Empire, Grushi excelled as commander of a dragoon division in Marshal Murat's cavalry reserve. He was praised by the Emperor for his part in the Great French Charge at Eylau, played an important role buying time for Napoleon at Friedland, and expertly covered the French right wing at Wagram. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded 3rd Cavalry Corps and was wounded at Borodino.
So why is he only 22?
He survived the horrors of the retreat, but was left so exhausted it took him several months to recover.
Oh, wow.
He returned for Napoleon's 1814 campaign in France, and was wounded twice more.
Oh, wow.
Grushi was made a marshal at the start of the 100 Days campaign, and commanded Napoleon's right wing at Ligny. After the battle was won, he was ordered to pursue the retreating Prussians to prevent them joining up with Wellington's Anglo-Allied army. 2 days later, as the Battle of Waterloo raged 10 miles to the west, Grushi made the fateful decision to follow his written orders rather than march to join Napoleon, and has been widely blamed for the French Emperor's defeat ever since.
Yeah, but he was told...
Grushi's vilification is not wholly fair, not least because Napoleon rarely encouraged his marshals to show initiative, and often flew into rages if they deviated from his written orders. Nor should one blunder obscure the distinguished record of one of the Grande Armée's best cavalry generals.
I agree. So why is
Grushi
he
fled
22?
to America after Napoleon's defeat to escape royalist reprisals, but was pardoned and returned to France in 1820. 21. Marshal Monse. Monse ran away from home to join the army at the age of 15. After 20 years of uneventful service, he'd risen no higher than the rank of captain. But then came the French Revolution. Most French officers were aristocrats, who, if they did not actively oppose the revolution, were nevertheless regarded as politically suspect. The result was that 3/4 of them either fled the country or were dismissed from the army.
Wow.
Monse, a middle-class officer with no strong political views, reaped the benefit, with meteoric promotion. By 1794, General Monse was leading the army of the Western Pyrenees to victory over the Spanish, on what was admittedly a relative backwater of the Revolutionary Wars. In 1797, he was dismissed for alleged royalist sympathies, but reinstated in time to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire.
Okay.
By his own admission, Monse was a sensitive officer. Honest, honourable, but lacking a ruthless streak or iron will to succeed. Napoleon was aware of his limitations as a general, but made him a marshal in 1804 as part of his emphasis on continuity between the Republic and his new empire.
So he was a political marshal.
Monse was appointed Inspector General of the Gendarmerie, France's militarized police force, and spent most of the rest of his career commanding reserve troops. He only held one field command again. In light of his victorious record against the Spanish, he was given command of a corps for the 1808 invasion of Spain, operating in the south of the country with mixed success. In 1809, he was replaced by General Junot and returned to France. Monse's finest hour came in the dying days of the Empire, leading the National Guard of Paris in a courageous but doomed defense of the French capital. In 1815, the restored King of France, Louis XVIII, ordered Marshal Monse to preside at the trial of Marshal Ney for treason.
Wow.
Monse regarded Ney as a hero for having saved so many French lives in Russia, and refused, declaring, "If I am not allowed to save my country nor my own life, then at least I will save my honor." After a short spell in prison, Monse was allowed to resume his military career, becoming...
I can't believe they put Ney on trial for treason. I mean, I guess it makes total sense, but I just didn't even think about it.
Governor of Les Invalides, in which role he presided over the repatriation of Napoleon's remains from St. Helena in 1840. At the end of the ceremony, the 86-year-old Marshal Monse announced, "And now, let us go home to die." 20. Marshal Pognatovsky.
I don't know that one.
Prince Jozef Pognatovsky was the King of Poland's nephew, but his military career began as a cavalry officer in the Austrian army, even serving as aide-de-camp to Emperor Jozef II himself. In 1789, he transferred to the Polish...
I see, he became marshal in 1813, one of the later marshals. That makes sense. In fact, second to last in seniority of the marshals. I guess because Poland had such a great... they felt like they owed so much to Napoleon. It only makes sense, you know.
Polish army with the rank of Major General, but could not save Poland from partition by its rapacious neighbours, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. By 1795, Poland had vanished from the map, swallowed up by its rivals.
Wow.
After Napoleon's defeat of Prussia in 1806, Poniatowski decided loyal service to the French Emperor was the best way to win Poland's restoration, although he never fully trusted Napoleon's aims.
Really?
Sombre, serious, and brave, Poniatowski proved an able commander of Duchy of Warsaw forces in Napoleon's service. When war broke out with Austria in 1809, while Napoleon advanced on Vienna, Poniatowski waged a brilliant supporting campaign against a larger Austrian army in Galicia. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded the Polish Fifth Corps. He and his troops distinguished themselves first at Smolensk and again at Borodino, leading the attack on the right wing.
Yeah, I remember that.
Poniatowski and his corps performed heroically throughout the campaign, motivated in part by their old animosity towards Russia. But by the end of the retreat, Fifth Corps had been virtually destroyed. Pognatovsky remained loyal to Napoleon, even though the disaster in Russia paved the way for the Russian reoccupation of Poland. He rejoined Napoleon in Germany in 1813 and was given command of the Polish Eighth Corps. On the eve of the Battle of Leipzig, he was made a marshal by Napoleon in recognition of his service and to inspire his Polish troops. Pognatovsky was the only non-Frenchman to receive this honor. He and his troops fought with their usual tenacity and skill at Leipzig, holding key villages on the southern front against the Austrian and Prussian onslaught. At the end of the battle, Pognatovsky commanded part of the rearguard.
He was just kind of in every battle, without me even realizing it. That's incredible.
But their only escape route, a bridge over the Elster River, was blown up too soon. Badly wounded, Pognatovsky tried to escape by riding his horse across the river, but he was swept from his saddle and drowned. He had been a marshal for just 4 days. In the short term, Pognatovsky's loyalty to France achieved nothing, as following Napoleon's defeat, Russia occupied Poland for the next century. But Pognatovsky's legend lived on, a model of Polish patriotism that inspired future generations.
Wow.
19. Marshal Jourdan. As a young French private, Jourdan saw combat in Georgia during the American Revolutionary War, but he then caught a fever that led to his discharge and plagued him for the rest of his life. When the French Revolution began, he was elected captain of his local National Guard unit, fought at the battles of Jemappes and Hochschutter, and was rapidly promoted to general. In 1794, he made his name defeating coalition forces at the Battle of Fleurus. This was a crucial victory of the Revolutionary War, which handed France control of Belgium for 20 years.
Wow.
It was also notable for the French army's use of balloon reconnaissance, the first effective use.
I guess how often were the balloons really used for reconnaissance in battles? I know that they, like you just said, it was common for, or more common for France at the time, but was it really even that common? Let me know.
Of an aircraft in military history. Jourdan became a prominent politician under the Directory, lending his name to a law that formalized France's policy of mass conscription. As a committed Republican, Jourdan refused to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire, but his fame as the victor of Fleurus was enough to ensure he became a marshal in 1804.
Interesting. So he didn't even support Napoleon, yet Napoleon still made him a marshal just because of how well he was known and his reputation. That's incredible.
Was on good terms with Napoleon's elder brother, Jozef. When Jozef became king of Spain in 1808, Jourdan went with him as his military advisor. But the situation in Spain would prove beyond Jourdan's military skills to solve. He faced stubborn resistance from the Spanish and Portuguese, supported by the British, and an equally stubborn refusal to cooperate from other French marshals in Spain, theoretically under Jourdan's command, but who repeatedly ignored his orders and openly questioned his competence. Marshal Soult in Andalusia was a prime offender, while Marshal Victor's insubordination at the Battle of Talavera contributed directly to the French defeat. Struck by another bout of ill health, Jourdan went home to recover. 2 years later he returned to Spain, but at the Battle of Vitoria in 1813, he and King Jozef were outmaneuvered and decisively beaten by Wellington.
Doesn't it seem kind of odd? I know that he's doing, or at least unwell, but that he would leave for 2 years when Spain is, it's constantly being fought over. Just seems kind of odd in my opinion.
Leading to the collapse of the Bonapartist Kingdom of Spain. Jourdan never held a major command again, but his 20 years of service and evident patriotism were widely recognized and respected. He was made a peer by Napoleon, a count by Louis XVIII, and died in 1833 while serving as governor of Les Invalides. Perignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellerman, Grushi, Monse, Pognatovsky, Jourdan. 8 down, 18 to go.
Yeah, okay.
Join us for...
Let's have a talk about that, you guys. Sorry about that. So yeah, 8 down, 18 to go. Wow. There's, I mean, I recognized, I think, 2 on there. After they further talked about him, I think I recognized 3, maybe 4. So I'm really excited for the upcoming episodes. Some of the ones that I thought were just the coolest marshals and names I'll know and I'll never forget because they were just seeming to be so important, you know? Hope you guys stick around. Hope you guys liked it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Till next time, stay safe. Love y'all. And I'm out.